My work comes from lived experiences. I introspect where I come from and the experiences I've had and try to put all of that into visual forms. And in this series here, I explore loss and migration, but specifically the remittance building as critical ideas in understanding the Texas-Mexico border. It speaks to my family's histories of migrating between the US and Mexico. I feel this is personal, but it's also something that can be relatable to like larger communities globally too, because the remittance building, the remittance landscape and migrants, are all over the world, and they're sending money back home. Just the way that even translates into visual formats is really interesting because they're physically in the landscape. It's almost like they're also physically there.
The work that's featured is 4 of my self-portraits from the series Making Reference, and that particular series looks at representation of Black women throughout the African diaspora. Some of these themes that the way Black women are depicted like carries throughout history and time. And so as I'm like absorbing all this information and looking at all these images, I start to also want to create my own images myself. The way these women are represented, there's not a lot of choice or agency happening there. And so what does it mean for me in 2020, 2017, when I first started this work, to photograph myself thinking about all these women? For me, the self-portraits were a way to represent that, or like adding into that same category, but in a different way, because it was me in front and behind the camera doing the work. Me being a lighter skinned woman, like people look at these photographs and maybe some people won't see a Black person present or a Black body present, even though there is one. And so I'm very curious about just people's perceptions and like how perceptions of Blackness, how it functions, just based sometimes on who's looking at you. It is kind of like a selfish thing for me to make this work, because it's really how I'm just processing all of this information around me. Like, how do I make sense of a diaspora of people that's like millions of people spread throughout the entire world who are the same but different at the same time?
I definitely think that the pieces are all talking to each other. They definitely all rest in like a historical context. Jamie is referencing the portrait studio as a place where African Americans were exploited in traditional historical photography. Veronica is referencing her like her family's ancestry and kind of the ruins of those places now. I'm thinking a lot about kind of the historical domestic space that quilts are always associated with, but I want to tie that to this kind of violence that I associate with the female experience. And so quilts are an object of comfort, but also the act of making them, you're like physically stabbing the fabric over and over again. These are soft objects, but they're obviously, the bodies are like torn apart or interrupted, and they're resting, but they're not at the same time. A lot of the work that I make comes from, I guess, my reactions to personal experiences. And focusing on those reactions, I just start thinking of like images, and I want to create them. I feel like I need to create them, and it helps me process those experiences as well. And then it's also just super gratifying to have the physical object afterward.